He knows everything about it. And we're joined by Neil Shackleton. Neil's from Medoola, and they are sustainable packaging, retail, and supply chain supply chain consultants. There you go. So Neil is our thought leader and expert who guided us on this study. And Maria, maybe you can start the presentation.
You won't believe, Michael, I'm already on it. Just do the wizardy thing. Yeah. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah.
I think everyone should be able to see it. Fantastic. Okay. So, by the way, for those of you who haven't had the sustainability report we are referring to, don't worry about it. Everything will be explained in this webinar, but for those who haven't had the sustainability report, you will get your copy at the end, so you can just take it away from this call today, and you can read everything we talk about in detail, in more detail. So the first slide, just a quick word on who we are. Maria and I are working for Fastuna, and Fastuna, we're doing automated online consumer surveys that can be launched in very, very little time and bring results back in 24 hours. So we really support an agile approach to give you actionable insights in real time. That is our aim. So the solution we used for this study with Medoola was our Fastuna DIY solution. And we give you, in the end, we give you a QR code so you can check it out for yourself. Right, so why did we do the sustainability study, you might ask yourselves. And basically a lot of our clients were asking questions in regards to what consumers really think about sustainability. So when Sustainability Week approached, we wanted to contribute. And we just know it's such a hot topic. So we teamed up with Medoola to design the questionnaire. And we took the key questions that our clients were asking, and we ran a survey based on 200 Brits aged between 18 and 64 years using our DIY solution. And by the way, we really get results back quickly. So, and as we believe in truly actionable results, instead of just collecting huge bundles of data, we took the results, the facts and figures, and discussed them with Neil to make them truly actionable. So what you get today is a lot of insights where Neil actually had his brain put into, so to say. So what we wanted to find out is basically how much consumers are on the same page with businesses to also sort of get a definition from them. So what do they really consider to be sustainable in regards to the claims, the values, and does it for you as brand and business owners make sense to add your claims to the packaging, for example? Then we looked at the recycling issue, and we also looked in particular at plastic, because plastic is like the culprit for everything at the moment, but there might be a hidden agenda to it, something surprising. So, and we also looked at where some brands and categories stand in regards to the sustainability agenda. So, Neil, maybe you take over here at this point, because this goes into the different definitions.
Yes, of course, and I'm also furiously trying to figure out why my video isn't coming back on, but we'll sort that out in a minute. Anyway, let me talk you through this. Let's start at the beginning, and thank you for that intro. So, if we start at the bare basics of sustainability, it is very difficult to define what sustainability is. You know, even to define it as a statement. And even for those of us that work in this area, we still find it difficult to agree exactly what that means. Now, if we're working in this area constantly and we can't define it, then you can imagine how this filters out, you know, to governments, retailers, brand owners, and the consumer at the end of the day. The topic is always extremely emotive. It triggers an emotional reaction whenever you bring up sustainability. And clearly there's so much noise driven by the media around the topic that it can cause a lot of confusion at any given level. The stuff that you see in the media generally tends to focus on just one subset of sustainability. And sometimes it's not even factually correct. So, you know, in a lot of cases here, greenwashing is certainly not helping anyone in these instances. So at Medoola, we take our clients on a journey which is about sustainable system thinking. And the model that you see here is based on the 3 core values of sustainability. So we have social, economic, and environmental. And overlaying the 3 in the Venn diagram style, you'll see that sustainable system thinking sits right in the heart of this. It's the sweet spot. So when you make a change and you are applying sustainable system thinking to this, you will find that that change is cost efficient. From all the way through to a consumer level, you get an easy to adopt formation habit, and you create an environmental reduction at the same time. Now, it's a very tricky area to get to, because clearly if you waver outside the core area, you can run into uneconomical green technology, which just simply isn't cost efficient. You will get unadopted green technology where consumers just will not form a habit around what you've done. And it may be that you haven't thought about the system end to end in that respect. And then we've got human-centered design, which has been a long time being the kind of focus for R&D development. But that's about human functionality rather than thinking about sustainability. So overlaying these 3 factors gives us the chance really to build a really true value sustainable system. We can take all stakeholder viewpoints into the mix here, and what it builds is a long-lasting sustainable initiative rather than a quick PR win, and we see lots of those at the moment. So I shared this model with the ladies at Fastuna, and we've used this to kind of take us through the report. So please keep this in mind as we run through the report, and we'll pick up on it again a bit later, and hopefully my video will come back as well.
Excellent, thank you, Neil. So we asked ourselves the questions, do consumers have the same understanding of sustainability as brand owners? And as Neil already said, there are loads of definitions out there, and you see that reflected in consumer answers as well. So when it comes to sustainability, the first question we ask consumers to give us spontaneous answers in regards to what sustainability actually means to them. And 2 big topics stood out, and one of them was the environment and the other one was the packaging. So these basically went across the whole board of consumers. The rest was more or less, you know, there were different topics, as you can see on our wonderful word cloud there. There were different topics mentioned, but these 2 were the most important issues basically that are being picked up by consumers when it comes to sustainability.
Yeah, you already can see that this is already a skew in terms of like not very holistic view if we keep in mind Neil's model.
Yeah. So we then asked at the next step to rate based on a scale of 1 to 5 different statements in regards to sustainability. So one thing that really stood out was that topic sustainability has really been picked up by consumers. So 84%, which is, I think, a huge number, agreed that brands and products have to move towards sustainability. Now, we need to bear in mind, though, that all these consumers have a different definition of what sustainability really is. So we need to look into that as well and define it further to really find out what is it people are looking for. And we have 60% of consumers that are willing to pay more for sustainability. Now, 84% think we should move there, but only 60% are willing to pay more. So there's a gap between the understanding of what sustainability means to actually companies that needs to be communicated to consumers as well. So why should be, for example, plastic packaging that can be recycled be more expensive than non-plastic wrapping, for example. So there are loads of questions that are being around that topic alone. And we have only 66% of consumers who trust the sustainability claim products make and brands make. So that, I think, is a number that is just not acceptable. So it needs to be a lot higher, because if people don't trust it, people won't support it.
Yeah, I have a comment on trust, because when I was reading through the comments that people made, and we had a lot of comments, and there were quite a few concerns about trust. So they say, well, there are companies communicating a lot, like around sustainability, but can we trust all of them? So it is something around, because there was a question in the beginning about media, you know, so obviously people hear a lot in the media. And the question is, and also a lot from the brands. So this is a question again, you know, how trustworthy those, you know, the communication is.
Yeah, and it's also, we can see later on, we'll see how much friction media is creating around certain topics, just concentrating on one particular topic, basically, or one particular pillar of the model Neil introduced. So as you can see here, 45% of Brits feel guilty when not buying sustainable products, which clearly shows there's an emotional side to it, to sustainability as well. We need to take into consideration. Yet 25% of Brits didn't even understand the sustainability issue at all. So they had no understanding of what sustainability is. So there's still huge room for education there. There's a huge gap between what companies and brands are trying to get to people and what people really pick up on and understand. And at least 75% of people claim that they buy products from sustainable, or they try to buy products that are sustainable. But the question is, what is it they consider to be sustainable? Because the definitions vary yay much. So we don't really know what is it actually they are picking out when they are buying a sustainable product. So I found this really, really interesting. So if you tie up all the different knots, then you'll find there's loads of more questions. So we asked then people why products should be sustainable, you know, so what's their mindset behind that? And we classified the answers based on the 3 pillars of the Medoola system. And the first pillar is the environmental pillar. So as we already know, the environmental aspects are huge in people's minds. So there are a lot of whys around this. For example, we have the carbon footprint that was mentioned. We have saving the planet as a goal of sustainability people wanted. We have the reduction of pollution and waste. Some even thought that the government and corporations are responsible for damaging the environment. So we have a strong aspect of giving third parties the whole responsibility for this, which also has to be taken into consideration. You know, so people think that your brand and your product is responsible for the plastic bag that is killing the turtle in the Philippines. So this needs to be taken in the, you know, when you deal with this subject, this needs to be taken into consideration. And one huge area was recycling, and we see how people perceive certain packaging, for example, and why they're not using it, even though it's highly recyclable. We get to that a bit later. So the next pillar we looked at was the social perspective. And with that, people mostly mentioned fair wages, thinking about future generations. And here we really had the trust issue coming up. So for some people, it's very, very important that companies don't overclaim. So they're quite aware of the fact that there's a lot of overclaiming happening, and people don't want that to happen. So I think that needs to be also in the back of our heads. So we should not overclaim. People are aware of the fact that we do overclaiming. We then looked at the economic perspective, and we found that many economic statements actually cross border with social and environmental challenges. So products should be sustainable and recyclable, but the question was posed why they would have to be more expensive. So brand owners need to explain, product owners need to explain, why is it more expensive to produce in such a way, and why does the consumer have to carry part of it? There's a lot of education that can be done around that. And while 60% are ready to pay more for sustainable products, they also take into consideration like current situations like COVID, for example. So 60% are willing to pay more, but at the same time, under the current circumstances, they question if these products should be more expensive. And one person even made it, I just took it in there because I thought it was funny, even considered this whole sustainability issue to be a marketing ploy aimed at a specific target group. So, so truth is obviously a very, very big issue for people there. So we then asked people what are the most important issues that need to be addressed and gave them a list. And from our findings, we can conclude that companies need to communicate in a more holistic way, like you can see on this, on the three pillars of Medoola, and not just certain aspects on it. And Neil, maybe you can pick up on this again and explain a bit more, because I think this is so important as well.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you can see there, you know, when I mentioned it earlier, that everybody has an emotional response to this, and what you're seeing here is subsets of the entire sustainable chain. So you're seeing that what's being called out here it mirrors essentially the topics that are very highbrow and have had most attention in the media. So you look at the environmental one and obviously pick out 70% less plastic there, which is a consumer response there. But then what you need to see with this is that none of these are wrong, you know, and all of these are points within the model. It's just that everything within this model is cause and effect. So you can put a plaster on one problem here and potentially fix it, but then you're not addressing the other factors along the way. So there's a whole heap of work to be done here. It's not a kind of short journey, but you need to be very conscious that the decisions that you make can impact further up and down your sustainable supply chain. You know, we look at the one there that probably sticks out for me more than most is that, you know, we have the 51% locally grown products. Now, if you think about that, that's great. You know, economically, that means smaller supply chain. Socially, that means interacting with your local, regional industry growth. Environmentally, you know, you're actually using and harvesting what you've got and working within your smaller supply chain parameters. So it ticks a lot of boxes here, but then you need to overplay the fact that, you know, consumerism is here, has been here a long time, and it's here to stay. And it's kind of, can we locally source all our products? And the answer to that is no. Will the consumer challenge the fact that they can't get their blueberries 365 days a year because they can't be produced in this way? So there's lots of questions that this system throws up, but it's about moving all these items down into that middle tier. And there's lots and lots of room here to maneuver and to drive sustainable success.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And I also want to say that from the holistic point of view, is really interesting again how the distribution of answers, you know, fall out. And I think you mentioned earlier is about media. So when you see the biggest percent, I would say those are the topics that are the hottest ones, that obviously more, you know, people hear from the media and they pick it up. Okay.
Excellent. And so the next question we ask is, what do consumers associate with sustainable brands, labels, and products? And that's so really interesting what we found. So as you can see, people think products should come from sustainable sources, but what really, really surprised me was to find clothing at the top of the rank. I would have assumed that fresh produce is the most important one, maybe followed by milk or something, but clothing was really surprising me. And I think Maria was more surprised by the cleaning products. So this is really interesting. And if we look at more categories, we find that some of the products you find here that should really be ranked a lot higher weren't really recognized by people. Petrol, for example. So most people probably have issues with petrol, either thinking it can't come from a sustainable source, we're depleting our oil reservoirs, and they don't really understand that these companies and corporations actually do a lot in regards to sustainability. So there seems to be a message missing there. That should be put out stronger, because they only look at one product. They only look at one sort of small item and judge the whole industry on it. Same surprise I had with pet food. For example, I'm a pet owner myself, and I know the guilt when it comes to buying fresh pet food, because it's always wrapped in plastic. And my perception was plastic is killing turtles. So I felt guilty when buying pet food. And that way I sort of not looked at any of the issues related to pet food. So I never thought about whether or not my pet food is sustainable or not. And this study really opened my eyes, because I'm not the only one. There was only 34% of people who actually consider pet food to be important for sustainability. And the market is huge. I mean, it's not a small market, and it's the resources are coming from the same as we have for human consumption. So there's no difference, there shouldn't be difference, but there's a huge communication gap there. The same with the soft drinks. The soft drink industry, they're battling with being considered to be the culprits when it comes to plastic. But what about the recyclability of plastic bottles? So there are a lot of let's say there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to communication, and when it comes to also brand and product management in regards to that.
I agree with you, Michaela, because I want to pick on soft drinks as well, because for me, I would say, again, how to bring this holistic perspective to consumers' mind, not just you're working around, around the sustainable packaging, but you're working around sustainable products, and the whole system should be working, should be more sustainable. So for me, it's like, again, and then how you communicate it to consumers.
Yeah, and the same.
Yeah, sorry, I think let's move on, because we just have maybe 5 minutes, and then we want to have some time for questions as well. But this is such an exciting topic.
Yeah. So when we asked for spontaneously, or when we ask consumers to spontaneously call out brands that are sustainable, 25% couldn't think of a brand nor a product. That figure I found quite shocking in total. And Ecover, who came on top of all the brands, only 9% of people had a spontaneous call out, spontaneous mention of Ecover. So everyone else you see on this lovely tree is below 9%. So I found that quite shocking. It looked different when we prompted people to associate. When we prompted the association, we suddenly had a different picture. There was M&S with 52%, IKEA 44%. So these companies are doing something right in regards to getting the message across to people. But when not prompted to the answer, people can't think of them. So there's a gap in between what they're communicating and what really sticks in people's minds.
Yeah, even Shell, again, we were talking about petrol. Shell was 24%. So people do associate Shell, it's one fourth, as a quarter. So there is a direction there. But again, we don't have brands that massively, just like seen as the brands that really, really sustainable.
Yeah, it really sticks out, so to say. Mm-hmm.
Okay, plastic fantastic.
Plastic fantastic. So we asked ourselves the question, does plastic from the point of consumers have a future? And 55% of people said, when I shop, they are always looking for recyclable packaging 100% of the time. So 55% look at that. And we have among the recyclable materials, plastic is on top together with paper and cardboard, which really surprised me. So the message is there. People know it's recyclable, even more so than glass, metal, and textiles. So that was, you know, message well brought across to people. They know it's recyclable. So when we look at it, the next slide shows 54% avoid plastic or try to avoid plastic. So why? It's highly recyclable. They don't avoid cardboard, for which we have to chop down trees. So, but they are avoiding plastic. So why is that? So we really seriously asked ourselves the questions and grilled our brains. But the figures showed that there's a gap in between trust again. It's a trust issue, basically. Though 39% of people recycle between 75 and 100% of the total amount of packaged goods, or 69% are also trying to recycle, only 13% believe that the packaging gets recycled and back into a product life cycle. And I found that shocking. Now, being based out of Germany myself, I know we have trust issues with that as well. We think part of our plastic probably ends up somewhere in the Philippines. But 13%, I found this number truly shocking, truly shocking. So there's a lot that needs to be done in regards to really gaining the trust of people. And I think this is something that needs to be brought forward to not only governments, but also to the packaging industry, and also everyone who's basically dealing with this product, because it's highly recyclable. We should use it. We should not disregard it and look for alternatives where we don't need alternatives. That's what I took from it. Maybe Neil, you can elaborate on that just with a few more sentences.
Yeah, sure. I mean, recycling is an industry waiting to get continually bigger. I think that there is a lag between the consumer's trust in recycling, purely because, you know, it's kind of whose responsibility is the waste at the end of the day. So me as a consumer, if I put it in my bin, my expectation is that somebody else deals with it. And that kind of classic thinking goes all the way through the supply chain at the moment. And ultimately, we don't see what's repurposed. We get told what's good or bad, but you know, that again is just kind of noise. So it's very difficult as a consumer to create an informed decision. I mean, just the fact that people believe that plastics is recyclable is absolutely immense within these figures, because what they're doing is saying, yes, we can recycle it, but then being distorted by noise which says we must get rid of plastic. And you know, packaging is all about reducing and trying to create the most efficient packaging that we can. But the fact that we can recycle any kind of packaging means that there's lots and lots to play with here. So for me, there's enormous potential and scope in this industry, and not just in the UK, but worldwide.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Neil. I think we have time for 2 or 3 more questions. So if you want to ask a question, please just drop them into the chat. And I think we had a few questions like, Phil, you said a good insight for me would be how many consumers actually do pay more for sustainable products rather than they say they would. Yeah, and that's definitely sort of that, you know, you could open up a whole sort of survey for that one alone, I think. But it would be so important to look at it, because I think if people understand the whole sustainable cycle of the product and the packaging, they would understand why the product is more expensive and why they have to pay a little bit more.
Yeah, we have the slide, actually, it's hidden here, about the actual behaviors, what people do in terms of sustainability as individuals. But I agree. I think it's like the kind of, you can see that the consciousness around sustainability is growing. So people be more mindful about actually what their own action as well. And we will be doing a big study on plant-based foods and how it linked to sustainability, for instance, next week, but next month. But I agree. I think it's just, also there should be some, initiatives in place so people can, sustainability becomes more accessible to people, like recycling, for instance, or how they can contribute, into the environment, into the economy. So I think that should be like kind of, sustainability should be coming towards people as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and to show, maybe Maria, you can quickly show that slide, unless there are any more questions.
I think I will. Yeah. Oh.
The people, because I think that's quite important as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just to say one thing on here, these are standards that have nothing to do with kind of on-pack claims for packaging. And at the moment, there's over 400 different claims you can put on pack, which will give consumers some level of assurance over recycle, don't recycle, plastic-free, non-free from additives, soil, all this kind of stuff. And they're not being picked up by the consumers. Now, you may argue in FMCG that there's just too much noise on pack anyway, but clearly I think there's a need to kind of have a very, very good baseline here in terms of, a system that can be adopted not just in the UK but worldwide, which is very simple to understand.
Yeah, definitely. And Susan, I agree that it is not being picked up enough that plastic is so highly recyclable. And I think we probably need a different system in order to recycle plastic as well. So I think there needs to be, we can see international initiatives going on where companies pick up this issue and they start recycling programs in different countries as well. I've seen sort of cleanups in India. I've seen different type of initiatives happening around the world, but I think in the Western world, we need to really, really bring out the message, because I think it's so important for people to understand that plastic is not the culprit, but the way we deal with the plastic, the way basically how we treat plastic as a packaging material at the moment, that is the problem.
Yeah, I will stop sharing. I just want to say that if you're interested, we have more information actually that we didn't present it today because we don't simply have time. So if you have your questions, you want to follow up, write to ask@fastuna.com, or you can go to our website and explore our solutions.
Yeah, you can just scan the QR code and you're right there. Can you share that again so people can scan it? And Maria, why don't you share the sustainability report, the link to the sustainability report in the chat, so you can just get your copy of it.
Yeah, I will do in a second. Did you guys take all the questions? Because I see a lot in the chat box.
Hold on, I'm going through this. That is... okay, wondering if you happen to have any data on Southeastern Europe, a question from Bulgaria. This study we just did based on the UK.
The thing is, like, we do have Bulgaria as a part of our panel, so we can run the same kind of study or the more tailored study to your needs in Bulgaria. So we don't have any public figures from Bulgaria, but we can run it for you. Just write to us, ask@fastuna.com, and we can discuss.
Yes. Okay, getting rid of the PARN would help. This is where a lot of the bad news stories start from. Okay, did you ask where the public gets their information from? Who do they believe?
You mean the trust, what public ask, what people, whom people trust? We didn't actually ask about whom they trust, but we can definitely see, you know, there are trust issues there, as we commented earlier. Yeah, and again, you can see, you know, there's like when people, for instance, when the brands vocal out as a sustainable, so it's definitely brands doing something right in their communication to be associated with sustainable. So people won't call them out if they, you know, will say, oh, you know, this is something dodgy about what they're doing. So it's very interesting. It's a great question. Thank you for that.
There's another question. Do you have insights if consumers see companies responsible for education in sustainable issues, or this is seen as governmental or public responsibility? We actually didn't ask this question, but to be honest, I would think from my point of view, and I can just give my point of view, that it's all three. So that I think it's a joint effort. So I don't think we can push this into the hands of just a single sort of workforce. Let's say, okay, companies are all responsible for this now, and the governments just go, well, we don't participate in this. I think it's a joint effort. It's an effort we need to communicate to consumers, because every single consumer is responsible, as well as companies need to bring out or share their message, their sustainability efforts, and make people understand that consumption, for example, the usage of plastic, this is not being communicated, that it increases the shelf life of products, so it decreases food waste. So these issues, for example, that would be something I would think a company would have to bring out and say, our product has a shelf life of XYZ if we wrap it in plastic. If we don't wrap it in plastic with alternative packaging, it would have a shelf life of only XYZ. So it would increase the food waste we're producing. Yeah, I'm not sure. Neil, what do you think?
Well, absolutely. That's you just kind of half explained exactly what we do. You know, it's kind of again, it's playing the cause and effect. So if you change a material, you need to understand exactly what that impact's going to be. You know, you don't just take a material out, you need to understand the material replacing it. You need to understand all the factors that go into that. Shelf life is a really big one, and it's going to be a bigger topic going forwards. And there's just so many variables that you need to plug in if you are going to deliver any kind of sustainable system that you can fully validate. And that's the essential component here, is you need to validate, not just from a marketing perspective for claims, but you're going to need to be able to validate all your products in markets so that your strategic direction is on point.
Yeah, I also want to say sometimes for habit formation is important to set up certain behaviors, and sometimes you know, you just tell people what to do and give the clear instructions. I think Germans are good in it. Even though, Michaela, you mentioned that there's trust issues in Germany as well, but
there are trust issues, but people get sanctions, so you do feel massive guilt when you put your plastic just into the normal bin. People over here to do that. We all have our plastic bins, or most regions in Germany have the plastic bins, and recyclable material goes into one bin. So it's kind of like for everyone, it's a no-brainer. And even the neighbors pointed out and go like, oh, look, she didn't recycle properly. So, you know, there's like the social sanctioning almost going on, at least in Berlin. I know it. I know my neighbor knocked at my door and said, your card box wasn't in that bin. And I said, yeah, I didn't get around to, you know, tearing it up. So there's a bit of, you know, socially people are very aware of this, and they stick to the rules, whether or not they believe in plastic is getting recycled or not, but they stick to the rules there.
Yeah, there are some comments and Q&A sections as well, I noticed.
This came in. Okay, so greater investment from Neil. Greater investment is recycling infrastructure is now essential, as we will not be able to send our thin plastic film to non-OECD countries from 2022. Neil, do you want to say a bit more about this?
That's exactly right. I mean, we need the infrastructure, irrespective of whichever country you're in the world, the infrastructure needs to build. And clearly there's going to be a time lag to scale this up. But I think it's important that we don't make decisions now about any kind of material that will impact us incorrectly in future. And this is the thing, you know, it's kind of There are mono materials in plastics which can be easily recycled now, and it's the recycler's dream at the moment, because they can take the right profitable materials and work them through the streams. But over time, it's going to be about adapting and taking back in those laminated materials and moving this through. So you can see it's going to be a very efficient model, and the technology is coming on board as well, which is fantastic. But there is going to be a time lag. My worry will be that the noise around certain issues, and especially around plastic, may cause such a negative reaction to plastic that it may be lose a lot of traction before the infrastructure comes on board. That would be my main worry, and obviously something that I'm keen to see not happen at the moment.
Yeah, and he also said at present 67% of our thin plastic filming waste is shipped out to third world countries. Disaster awaits if we do not invest in infrastructure for recycling of all packaging, because these export streams will be prohibited shortly. Yeah. So it needs to be done locally. So more investments need to be done, but I think it's also what I think, Neil, correct me there, but I think it really needs to be brought out that plastic is not the culprit. I think this just is a message that needs to go out much stronger. Not only to people, but also to the media, because there are, as someone mentioned, the BBC plastic bashing that is happening really turns people away from this recyclable material. So I think we need to get the media on board as well.
Exactly, and this, we run a life cycle analysis for our clients specifically for this basis, and this is to basically look at what the best solution is for each client, and make sure that a material change is a material change that resonates with that company, but makes a difference to the planet. Because if it doesn't, it's kind of, there's no point in taking 76 tons of plastic out, as one retailer did recently, and then replacing it with 120 tons of corrugate. It doesn't weigh up, because you're actually bringing more packaging into the equation. However fast you can recycle these things and whatever the processes are there. So we need to think a little bit more laterally, and that's some of the work we're doing at the moment.
Great. So I think we've exceeded our time already. So
yes, we do. I wanted
Thank you so much for everyone who stuck around. Thank you so much. It was great that you joined us. Thank you for giving us your time.
Yeah, the recording will be available shortly, hopefully tomorrow. It's our media guru, Fiona, who is behind the scenes here. She will be moving it to YouTube. And we also will be sending the short follow-up survey, because this is actually the first event of this kind we are doing, and we are planning the series on events on different hot topics during the year. So we really want to improve, to really meet your expectations. We really want to have you as our, loyal visitors, attendees on this type of webinar. So please, reply to our survey, and thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much, Vasya. Thank you so much, Celine. Thank you so much, Phil.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the link, Maria put the link into the sustainability study. It's it's in the chat, so you can download it. You can get your copy from there.
Yeah, it's over here. Yeah.